Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm hoping, let me just verify. Seems to be, the clarity seems to be better. Sorry about the fuzziness in the last video. I wasn't aware of that until the end. As you know, the midterm is upcoming. I know you're busy studying for many classes and there's a lot of material in this class. I don't want to repeat too much, so let me start by saying I'm not going to talk about the Civil War too much because that is the most important event. But I'm going to mention it, sort of its effect, and not so much the details like I did in class. Most likely this will be the first lecture of two. I'm probably going to record another one later today or tomorrow, unless this turns into a 1 hour lecture, which is also possible. So what we need to do really here is, I'm sure you're tired of hearing about Henrys and Edwards and repeated names, because that's what English kings do. But nonetheless, this is how the 17th century progresses. James the First, we'll talk about him first because I did skip over him quite a bit. So I think, let's just keep it simple. Queen Elizabeth had no son or daughter. She never got married for a number of reasons. We won't get into that, but probably one of them was, if she got married, the king would have excuse me, the king would have power over her, whereas if she remained unattached, without a partner, unlike today, like if Queen Elizabeth, for example, was the queen, the second Queen Elizabeth. She was the queen, and her husband was a prince. But that would not be the case if Queen Elizabeth married. The king would have sovereignty. He would have authority over her. So that's the number one thing that people talk about, but there's a number of other things. There wasn't really anybody good enough for her to marry, to be honest. Nobody had the power, the wealth, or pedigree for her to marry. So, that's a second reason. And she definitely was interested in men, but she may have, in her younger years, had some bad experiences with older men trying to persuade her to become, their mistress or something like that, and which may have somewhat changed her opinion about how much she trusted. All of these things are possible. We don't really know. But suffice to say, she never married, she never gave birth, and when she died, her nephew was the King of Scotland, and he remained the King of Scotland, so he's King James the Sixth as well. He's King James the Sixth. Oh, this is a terrible marker. He's King James the Sixth of Scotland, and he's King James the First of England simultaneously. But the kingdoms are separate, as I said. So he's got a really odd situation where he is the king of two countries, but England is more populous and has a lot more influence, power, wealth, population, and so on. So he starts to ignore the Scottish. And at the end of this lecture, or in the second part, I will talk about the Scottish, and I will talk about, sort of at the end of, some important people at the end of this 17th century you know, up and down, sort of back and forth struggle of religion, politics. It's really a transformative cultural moment. Um, the Reformation starts this in the 16th century, and it continues to sort of bubble and because, like I said, because of the skilled leadership, mostly of Queen Elizabeth, um, there's never an explosion of violence or protesting or conflict, but because of the personality of James and Charles, inevitably these issues, the five issues of tension that I talked to you about in an earlier lecture, they they're out of control. They can't manage them. I told you already, Charles is very stubborn and politically incompetent. You can see politicians these days, and you can compare Charles I to people who are now leaders of countries right now and in your lifetime, whether they're Korean or American or Canadian or other countries, who just insist on what they want to do and disregard the justice system and the political system and the popular, will. And the result is, in this case, civil war. And it can happen, it happens regularly, that if it goes too far, that and enough people resist, that the leader ends up having to fight for his authority. So that's what happens to Charles, and he loses. But back to James I. James I is a sympathetic kind of king. He's not a warrior. His mother married like 5 different people. He was the product of one of those marriages. He became the King of Scotland when he was very young, like only a baby. And he did a pretty good job. He was always a little bit scared of war and of guns and everything else. So he attempted, to avoid war and spending. He spent a lot of money on festivals, on clothing, on food, on paintings, on art, and everything. But he didn't spend a lot of money on war, and war is really the most expensive thing. So that's probably what saved James from having a serious financial problem, is that he didn't want, he made peace with every country he could. And he wanted every country to be at peace, and he thought that economics and trade were more important than conquering and attacking other nations, other kingdoms. His son was not like that. He tried to start wars. He tried to persuade or suppress or oppress everyone in the kingdoms and make them all do the same thing. But James was a pretty laid back or sensitive type king. He's not the warrior king like Edward III or Edward I or William or Henry II or Richard. Any of those guys we talked about. He's a completely different type king. That also is a problem, though, because Henry VIII was scary, and nobody's scared of the Scottish guy who doesn't speak English properly. He's not scary at all, and people are not intimidated, and he doesn't get the same respect. I can't imagine the things that people said about him and to him. They would never say to Henry. They would never have said it to Bloody Mary. They would never have said it to Queen Elizabeth. They would have been jailed or killed or punished. But James was a soft king. And that didn't really help him control, especially since he's really a Scot, not an English king. He's a Scottish king. He's only half English. One of the greatest things he did, though, is he did commission the King James Bible, which we abbreviate to King James Version of the Bible. Don't forget that, because it is a beautiful, it is a poetic, beautiful version of the Bible, and whatever version, it may not be the most accurate. Let me be honest, but it's almost poetic in its construction. It's just the period of time, like Shakespeare and other writers and poets and dramatists and writers are creating great things out of English, and this group of really skilled writers create this version of the Bible, which sort of demonstrates that English can be a beautiful language. And before that, French, Latin, Italian, Spanish, and pretty much any other language, on the continent was preferable, especially when it comes to the Bible. But the King James Bible showed how expressive the English language could be, and how the vocabulary and the idioms and the vocabulary and the range and the accuracy, all the things that English sort of. I know the spelling of English is annoying, and it's kind of got too many words in it, but it's a very expressive language, and it's the largest language in the world with the most words, and the King James Bible was at the beginning of that process of creation of linguistic sort of expression, which English didn't have. It relied very heavily on Latin and French and Greek, and it started to, Shakespeare is a part of this generation, and King James Bible. Some people say if you read the King James Bible from front to back, and you read all the Shakespeare plays, then you are a master of English. If you can understand that and you can appreciate it, then those are the two sort of monumental Renaissance works of English. So that's his major contribution, is the Bible. A group of people try to kill him on November 5th. There is a plot by Catholics to kill him, which subsequently is called Guy Fawkes Day. And surprisingly, nobody wrote about this in their papers. I did finish grading your papers, and I would ask you that just to wait if you want to hear more comments or get more feedback. Just wait until midterm periods are over, and then I'll get back to you. There's a couple people who emailed me asking me what's up with my grade or whatever. Just hold on until we do the midterm, and then because I got a lot to deal with, I just spent 10 hours yesterday grading those things. So just be patient and wait for me to to respond to individual questions and general questions about formatting or about content or organization. Those things I can tell everybody at once. If it's a particular thing that you did that's different than other people, then I'll talk to you individually. So there's this Guy Fawkes, who, along with a bunch of other Catholic people, he rents the basement underneath Parliament, hoping that he will blow up, I don't know, hundreds of kilograms of gunpowder while Parliament is in session, which would explode the entire government, including the king. Because the king isn't Catholic enough, which is really a big mistake, because actually James is just like Elizabeth. He doesn't really care if you're Catholic, as long as you don't try to kill him, or you don't, practice, behave like a Catholic in downtown London. He's going to leave you alone. So they're really going after a pacifist, sort of tolerant king and trying to blow him up. But anyway, they find out about this plan and they catch this guy named Guy Fawkes, and they celebrate the fact that the Catholics, fail. So we didn't talk about this, but it's in the book. There was a conflict between Spain and France, because Bloody Mary was married to Prince Philip of Spain, and England kind of didn't let him be the king because he was Catholic, and they were sort of worried that, Mary and Philip would both transform England into a Spanish kingdom that was Catholic. So there was a lot of tension during that. When Mary died and Elizabeth became queen, the issue became even more serious, and eventually Philip, the ex-husband of Bloody Mary, decided that he was going to invade England in 1588 with this gigantic fleet, the largest fleet of ships by weight that had ever existed, even bigger than the one in 1592 that happens on the other side of the world, when Toyotomi Hideyoshi tries to, does invade Korea successfully. However, in the Spanish Armada's case, the English have superior ships, experience. They're well supplied. They're what can I say? They are sort of at the ready, and the Spanish Armada is taking years to assemble. And by the time they move to attack, their plan really is just to move the Spanish army from the Netherlands and France to England, where they would, if they got onto the land, they would completely smash the English. But they never get even close, because by this point, the British Navy is arguably the most. I don't know how they do against Eason Shin. They might have lost, but in Europe, they are the most. They're superior. They have superior technical skill. They have superior experience. They have superior technology, navigation skill, and the Spanish are, even though they have so much more ships and people available, they can't even engage them. It's the same sort of scenario that happens with Isun Shin, is that the Panoksan and the Kabuksan, the turtle ships and the Korean ships, they just shoot the Japanese ships with cannons and blow them up. and the Japanese are trying to get close to them and shoot them with rifles and trying to jump on their ships. And Isun Shin is like, no, we're not going to let you just, you know, bring your ship right up next to us and throw some hooks on and walk over here and start fighting hand to hand. We'll just blow your ships up from 100 meters away, which he does every single time. And a similar thing happens with the Spanish Armada. The English ships are faster, they have longer range cannons, and the Spanish have better soldiers, but the soldiers never get a chance to get on the ships because the English ships are just going, the only way that they could actually get on the English ships is if they let them. It's the same thing that Isun Shin is like, why would I let you, put your samurai and your riflemen on my ship? I'm going to blow your ship up before you get close. It's I don't know. I mean, I know these leaders, Francis Drake, John Hawkins, in the English side, and Isun Shin in the Korean side. They're geniuses and they know what to do, but it seems very simple to me, is that the Japanese soldiers are better, the Korean ships are better. So blow up the ships and you never have to fight the soldiers. It's the exact same thing. The Spanish soldiers are better, everybody knows it, so don't just stay away from them and blow up their ships or chase them away. So the Spanish Armada ends up trying to get back to Spain, and half the ships get destroyed by storms. It's not even really the English ships that destroy them, it's the storms. So what happens here, though, which is very significant, is that Oliver Cromwell, during this is a moment that brings all of England together and makes them believe that they are the chosen people, that Protestantism, that English Protestantism is the chosen religion of God, and that they have a destiny. And then they have James I, and he's not that great. Then they have Charles I, and they're like, oh, well, this doesn't seem like destiny, and nothing's going well right now. Parliament, as you know, Parliament and the royalists, the supporters of the king fight, and Charles loses, and he gets killed by Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell establishes this sort of republican system that dominates the country for it's 5 to 10 years, but really there's a 5-year period where he is in absolute control, and he is the leader of the military, and he's the political leader, the military leader, and the religious leader, kind of. He's wielding absolute power, and there's nothing anybody can do about that. And when he dies, people are not really happy about that. They'd rather have kind of a goofy king who had partial power than an absolute dictator in charge of a republic who was so revered by them. He's sort of like George Washington in a weird way, except for he was also sort of racist and tried to exterminate the Irish. But he has too much authority for one person to handle, more authority than a king would. So actually, people start thinking, maybe it's better if we had a king rather than a super powerful general, dictator, fanatic, strict, ruthless, effective, but ruthless Lord Protector. So Oliver Cromwell dies, and his son Richard is actually kind of like not weak, but just not interested in these crazy sort of fanatical escapades that his father is. So he very quickly he's like, I would like to be, and then everybody says, no, yeah, I don't think so. And he says, okay, then maybe I'll just live in a house in the countryside. Is that okay? And that's what happens. He just retires in the countryside. So you get Charles II. He gets lots of money and he gets lots of support, but there's still tension between Parliament and him. But they're just sort of, during his reign, they're just sort of happy to have a king back. And that's called the Restoration. And he lives for a while, but as I said, he had 14 kids, none by his queen, because his wife, and he never divorced her, which is better than Henry, I suppose. But he never divorced her, but he had 14 babies, children with other people, but they don't really count. So he wills the kingdom to his brother, but the problem is James is like very Catholic, and it's too late. There's very few Catholics left. So what they do is they say, okay, Mary, which is King James' first daughter, she marries William, the stadtholder of the Netherlands, and they say in 1688, we have a Catholic king, we don't want him, so bring Queen Mary and come over here. And he has an army already because he's fighting all the time against French Catholics and German Catholics. So he comes over 1688. He basically just lands his army, and all of the English kind of just say, yeah, we don't really want Catholic James anyway, so you can be the king. And James II runs away. So he only gets 3 years before he runs away to France. And then you end up having this. Mary is the English one, William is the Dutch one, and the Glorious Revolution allows this partnership, which we call constitutional monarchy. That he is the ruler, but he must go through Parliament for nearly everything. Everything is a partnership. Sovereignty starts to become a sort of balance between command and acknowledgement and support. Like if you're the king and you want to do something and Parliament supports you, you're good. And if you're the king and you do something crazy, Parliament can stop you. That's 1688 is the beginning. This is the revolution that never happened. The revolution, this is really a very terrible name because it's not a revolution. Nobody dies. Well, very few people die. King changes. Government sort of readapts to the situation. And William is really only concerned about fighting Catholic Europeans. And so he continuously negotiates with Parliament for more money and more soldiers so that he can accomplish his goal, which is to, protect the Protestant countries of Europe, which is primarily parts of Germany, parts of France, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. And so he makes deals with them constantly. He's not a very popular king in general. He's not very fun. He doesn't care about art or music or any of the cultural things that Queen Elizabeth or other kings or queens did, like King Charles II loved parties and gambling and painting and music. And William was really, I think the only thing he really liked artistically was gardens, and probably that's because gardens just sit there and don't really bother you or change very much. And he was just a very he was just a very surly kind of conservative guy, who was really focused on his mission, which was to fight the Catholics in Europe, which he did successfully. And that's why the Glorious Revolution is called glorious, because it was a revolution without any violence and it was fast, but it didn't involve damage to people or property or to the nation. It was sort of like a very fast, smooth transition. So I'm not sure if the name's a good one or not, but that's what they call it. And yeah, I think, I don't know how long I've talked for, but I think that's a good way. It's a good place to stop. And then I'm gonna talk about certain people during this period. One of them is John Locke. Another one is Isaac Newton. And of course, we have to talk about Scotland and how they are involved in this whole situation. So the next lecture will take us to 1707 and describe how the Scottish are involved and how they become part of the United Kingdom. And that will be the end of chapter 3 and the material that you need to know for the midterm on Thursday. So thank you for listening to part 1. I think that's where we'll cut it off, and then I'll continue with part 2 either later tonight or tomorrow, and the lecture will be up for you to watch and to take notes on. Thank you for listening, and see you on Thursday.